You are listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network.
من هناك لشوارشتايجر
pegarle Ronaldinho Gaucho. Ya lo hace. Pierna derecha, directo al arco. ¡Golazo! 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 ¡Golazo!
This is Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio, your new live show about the beautiful game in all its glory, with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee. MLS, EPL, La Liga, Champions League, all is fair game. Powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us at sportspodcastingnetwork.com.
Exciting announcement here today to make, Kevin, off of the top. Soccer Today's logo. We're going to change it from the iconic logo, as much as an iconic logo could exist from the past couple years, but our iconic logo to some weird sort of minimalistic thing that won't make a lot of sense. Sound good?
No, over my dead body, Duane. Over my dead freaking body. We're not in Milan. We're not in Turin. No, right now. You know, we're not like Juventus trying to make the wheel in different shape. You know, when something works, why do you trying to change it? I was texting you earlier. You showed me the picture, and I'm around brewing. Why do we as a society always try to change everything? Always try to, let's redo it. Let's redesign things. Can we just continue to go with what works? Can we just continue? Look, it's been like this. Yeah, it changed a little bit over the years, but this iteration's been here for a while. The club's been successful. Why would you change the freaking logo?
Yeah, look, I mean, I just went through this with Manchester City last year, and most people liked the direction they went, which ironically...
At least your one looks nice because it's a throwback to like the 1800s or something.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's rather than trying to be modern, they've gone back. If anything, the logo they used for the decade or so prior to that was the one that was a little cheese ball. It had those 3 stars on it that didn't actually stand for anything when they put them on it. At least now you could, well, it'd be 4 stars now, but at least you can say that they've earned the stars in terms of league title. But back then they hadn't, so it was a bit odd there. But no, to get back to Juve, this is one of like the world's most iconic teams, and that logo, that badge, has been there for most of my memory. And certainly, if you're going to tweak it, and I get tweaks here and there, but if you're going to tweak it, don't go so dramatically. I think what people are going to criticize them for is it almost seems like it's they've Americanized it, is probably what the criticism will be, that they're making it kind of hip and jazzy, jazz, J for jazz. That's kind of what they're doing here.
And you know that, Duane, like, you know me, I'm dabbing on my logo design for a few years and I'm getting the hang of it. If you've been looking or listening to us for a few years and looking at the logos of the shows on your phone, like, it evolved a lot over the last 4 years, and it now looks like we didn't start like the minimalist trend, but we're simple. And I don't want to say me and you are simple, which, well, sometimes we are, but our logos are simple. But why make it simple? Like Juventus are trying, it's not even making it simple. I think it was simple before. Now it's just trying to make it, look at what we can do. We're going to make a like, kind of like a J that looks like a jersey mixed with, it's just 2 freaking lines.
Yeah, it's, if this was a logo, it actually looks kind of like something that you would have seen designed
by the way,
70s.
Duane, sorry to interrupt, but it's an audio show. But if you look at the description of this show in the podcast form, so if you look at if you're listening to this on iTunes, Stitcher, wherever you listen to the show, I will put the logo of Juve, the new one, in the description so you can yell at your phone at the same time as we do.
Yeah, and look, the reaction amongst Juve fans has been pretty dramatically. Someone said the results are split. There's, half of Juve fans think it's the worst design ever, and the other half are now contemplating, supporting another club. That's a bit extreme. Of course, that's not going to happen. But that's
so the 100% against are split 50-50.
Yeah, that's kind of the joke, but it's not too far removed. If you read some of the reaction on Twitter, it's just across the board ridicule. The only place you see any positive comments, of course, is coming out of this big event that they're having, the Black and White event that they're having in Turin tonight. Certainly, there's a lot of sex and jazz at that. If you look at some of the photos coming out of it, but obviously the people that are there are going to say nice things, because it's like when you go to a baby shower and the baby's really, really ugly. You're not going to say that to the parent's face. You're going to say it to each other in the car ride home.
Depends how many. Depends how boozy that shower is.
Yeah, precisely, and it will loosen the lips for sure, the booze. But yeah.
So what do you think of my baby? Well, to be honest, I think he's a little chubby. He should take care of himself more. I think he's like 3 weeks old, already has cheeks. Like, come on, girl.
Yeah. Lay down on the feedings, Mom. I mean, I know. Come on.
Jeez.
You're gonna give the kid a complex. No, yeah. So that's all the good comments you can see in that. It's really atrocious, if you ask me. I mean, like I said, I'm sure that a logo designer, someone who is not a football fan, that looks at this and just in the design world, might look at it and say, "Oh, there's clean lines on there, and it tells a message and blah blah blah." Like, it's probably fine that way from a pure design perspective, outside of traditions. But
it doesn't even look like a soccer or a football logo, Duane. It doesn't. If you would show me this, I would think it's, I don't know, like a little logo of a new party, of like a promotion nightclub. That's what I meant, like a party club or nightclub or something. I would never think that it's a soccer logo. Maybe we should hold judgment until we see it in action, and maybe they'll, with the outcry, like the Chargers of LA last week, with the outcry, it doesn't take long for design team to adjust. If they wrap that J better, if they put like a circle around it or a badge, or trying to make it look, I don't know, more soccer-y, quote unquote. Hey, that's a new word for 2016. 17, soccer-y.
17, yeah.
Make it soccer-y. But if you make that logo more soccer-y, maybe I can dig it. But right now, I think it's a wrong direction, and I think it actually doesn't suit the history of this club.
Yeah, it looks precisely. That's just it. And I think that's what it comes down to. If this was a new hockey team or something, Jacksonville Jaguars hockey team. I don't know why they're typing that, but anyway,
Jacksonville.
That was the logo. Well, you'd expect something different, but you go, all right, I guess. But because it was new and whatever, this is what they're going for. But to so radically departure from a tradition at a club of this stature, just it seems crass, is what it seems like. And there's a lot of things. Since they moved into that new stadium, the fact that they play, Chelsea Dagger after every goal kind of has always rubbed me the wrong way for a club of that stature too. Things like that. It's a weird little kind of international branding, but like many things that Europe does that seems kind of American, there's something a little off about it when they try and be American. Most Europeans, I know I'm taking a broad brush here, but it sort of works out that way. It's the same as, we seem a little off when we try and be overly European, right?
Hey, here's a quote for you.
In us.
Everybody tries to be somebody else. Can we all just be ourselves? Why are European fans trying to act more like American fans? American fans trying to act like European fans of the old. Everybody just be yourselves. Like, yeah, hey, we're deep today, Duane. Like, we're going deep into almost philosophy here.
It's profound, exactly. A strange choice, nonetheless. It's going to get a lot of conversation. It begs the question. This was actually intended to be our open-it. We call it open-it banter. The first 2 minutes of the show, but it's stretched into almost a full segment. We'll probably wrap it up here. But look, it'll be curious to see whether they reverse this. They probably spent a lot of money on it, but they're going to get so much pushback that it will be curious. I would think that they would probably stick with it at least through a short period of time, because part of the purpose of any rebranding is crass and commercial, right? They want to sell more strips, but that is really the power that the fans have in this particular case, especially at a club like this where you have looters and things like that can also push back in more dramatic ways. But just in general, the fans there can push back in the sense that they just don't buy the junk. And if they don't buy the junk and they continue to sort of say, we hate this logo, go back, I probably won't be long until they do that, because ultimately the dollar, regardless of where you are in the world, will speak the final word on things like this. So if you're a Juve fan out there and you truly think this is an appalling decision that they've made, don't buy it. Just don't look. Don't buy it at all. That's my message to you, and that's what I'd be doing if I were a Juve fan. Any final thoughts, Kevin, before we move on?
I think I said all I had to say. Juve, this is a disgrace if you don't change what you're doing.
All right. In our next segment, we're going to talk sort of about the legacy of Patrice Bernier, who signed a new 1-year deal today and has basically announced his retirement a year ahead. He's going to take over, be an academy coach at the club at the Impact after he leaves. So we'll talk more about that after the break. We did plan to talk a little bit about the draft right now, but there is for the last 2 minutes, but there is a draft special out there. If you didn't see it pop up on your phone over the weekend, I produced it on Saturday. Interviewed Alex from 55-1. He talked about the excitement in Minnesota around having the first overall draft pick, a little bit about their picks, and a little in general about the Loons preparation right so far in this inaugural season, Kevin. But quick thoughts on what you thought the Impact did in the draft. Any overriding thoughts you want to put out there?
Well, a lot of people are saying that Montreal Impact have done a very, very good draft, and I have to say even more. I think that at least round 1 and 2 for Montreal has the potential of being a great class. Shamit Shomi for me was a steal late in the second round. I think the Generation Adidas Canada label affected, and if you look at all the players with that label, they all got drafted later than expected. Reed was selected just before Shamit Shomi, but Shomi for Montreal, I think, is a quite quote unquote more proven commodity than other players, having played for FC Edmonton over the last few months and having that amateur contract with them, having his eligibility and being a Generation Adidas Soccer Canada player. We'll see, but it did affect his ranking. Like he slid, and he talked about in an interview. It's on the. Let me just give me 1 second so I can actually refer to you the right way. On the 11.ca, so Steven Sandor talked to Shamit Shomi and said that this slide will only serve him as motivation. He was disappointed. They were more expected to be first round, and then he was selected in the second round for the first overall. For him, it will be a type of offseason where he's going to have to prove himself in the training camp to earn a contract. There's those aspects because of Generation AD that's going to be facilitated. But Montreal Impact are taking a gamble, but the fact that he was still available, I think, is the reason why Montreal picked him, and being a more offensive type of player. And then goes back to Montreal's first draft pick, Duane. And Nick Depay, I believe, the way it's pronounced, a very tall, very strong, big striker, a type of player that can hold the ball and help facilitate the involvement of Piatti and other midfielders. Apparently, Joey Saputo mentioned today, Duane, as well, that Piatti has a 100% chance of coming back next year. But for Nick Depay, he was considered maybe the best striker in this year's draft, and the Montreal Impact got him. So it tells you where they thought they had needs, and we'll see where now those players, especially Nick, if he gets that contract after the training camp.
Yeah. With Shomi and the GAs, the Canadian GAs, Alex and I actually talked about it on the special show, and we sort of agreed that I'm not going to go so far as to say there's a bias against Canadian players, because that sounds a bit tinfoil hatty, but I do think that the Canadian players still have to prove themselves to a degree that American players might not within the minds of a lot of Major League Soccer players. So the fact that Shomi had a bad combine, and by all accounts he did, and I think even he himself will acknowledge that, probably suggests that is the case, because he dropped further than he should for a guy that has professional experience. I'll say that unabashedly. I do think the Impact got a good steal there, and I do think he actually, ironically, again, has a better chance to probably stick than the first round draft pick does, who I think probably will play in Ottawa for a year or so. So we'll see how this one works out. In terms of the other two Canadian teams, again, I went over this already in pretty good detail on the show, but just real briefly, I do like the fact Toronto dumped those 2 second round picks for the $75,000 in TAM. It was the only TAM traded in that first day. It does suggest, at least it was up to then, I'm not 100% sure after that off the top of my head, but it does suggest to me that Toronto has a specific target in mind for this window, and they did say that in a Kurt Larson article after the fact. So it will be interesting to watch that, and if that does in fact come to fruition, I think that's ultimately going to be seen as the yield the TFC had from the draft. Their first round pick fell, bad combine again, good risk to take. Vancouver's picks were a little more traditional from what you'd expect. I think you just have to wait and see whether they play out or not, because it's really kind of fool's errand to predict right now what these kids, any of these kids, even the first round picks, are going to do down the line, because there's, as we've said before, a lot of failure coming out of the draft, and you just hope that you got one of the 30% or so that do make a contribution, and you especially hope you get one of the 15% that make a significant contribution, but that's up in the air until time has passed. Kevin, let's take a quick break. We'll come back and we'll talk about Patrice Bernier.
You are listening to Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
Kevin, Patrice Bernier, the end, we now know when it will come. It will come at the end of next year, marking when it does happen, and we have a full year to say goodbye to him. At least the fans of Montreal do. Hopefully fans in other markets will recognize what a significant player this was, although it's probably a bit much to ask the American markets. But hopefully the other two Canadian markets can, at least the informed fans, can have a chance to, in their own way, say goodbye to him when he does visit them this year, if he does. First off, Kevin, your overall thoughts on the direction that Bernier announced today?
Patrice Bernier always mentioned that he wanted to be a coach and a manager, or being involved in his post-career. Always he went for his license before. So Patrice Bernier now announced that he will be as part of the academy coaching staff next year after he's done, next year, literally, like this year in 2017 will be his last season. He ends it where it all began in 2000 with the Montreal Impact. He did play 73 games between 2000 and 2002 for the Montreal Impact, then went on his European journey, played across many different leagues with many different teams, great games, great career, long stint too with teams in the Scandinavia, Norway, Kaiserslautern, only 15 game, but the FC Nordjylland, 78 game in Norway, and Tromsø, 68 game as well. A lot of great moments he had in Europe. And then when the Montreal Impact came back in 2012, seems like the timing was just perfect. Patrice Bernier in the prime of his career, coming back home, where the club goes back to the top flight, and he is present. And the Montreal Impact has now become the club that he's played the most for. 124 games played so far in his second stint with the team, being the player that played the most for the club, with a few stats leader as well. He's the penalty kick leader in the history of the Montreal Impact. Patrice Bernier is one of the best Canadian players ever, in my opinion, not just only because of his play and his stats, but it's because of his attitude, because of his experiences abroad, here. Not always easy, but always doing it with class and a lot of respect for the game and respect for every club that he played for. Patrice Bernier, for those reasons, for me, is one of the best Canadian soccer player ever.
Yeah, and look, I'm going to agree with that, and his longevity alone speaks to that.
If my math are correct, it would be his 20th season. I'm not good at math, so I might be off. It might be 19, but I think it would be his 20th season.
And that is an incredible accomplishment for any professional footballer anywhere, and he's still contributing now, and that's the amazing thing. I thought perhaps 2 years ago his playing time had been badly reduced. I had felt that maybe at that point he might step aside, but he fought through that. Seems to have found a great role in Biello's Impact now, and he continues to play a major contribution in the success of that team. He was one of their key players in the playoffs this year, just this past year at his advanced age now. He's D-Rose, Montreal, like the Quebec Montreal D-Ro, right? Like he is that kind of player from that generation, in the sense, not the same type of player, but he's in the sense that he was so recognizable for a part of the country, just like Duane de Rosario was a Torontonian. Yeah. Everyone knew that, and he was so associated with Toronto. Patrice Bernier has been so associated with Montreal, and I think that that's a valuable thing too. And it's great that he's going to stick around and continue to be an ambassador, a literal coach, but also he will always, just by nature of being Patrice Bernier, be an ambassador for the Impact. So it is a wonderful thing that he's coming back, and he does, that generation of players that really were ultimately in their peak years before, especially the Impact and the Whitecaps, his generation were in their peak years generally before those teams existed. D-Row was kind of in the middle of his peak when TFC first launched, but nonetheless, he did come to TFC. I think, he won an MVP after the fact, but nonetheless, his second stint certainly was after the fact. So they kind of have a different relationship with Major League Soccer, is what I'm saying. That they are the guys that came back to be ambassadors and got to be rewarded and started their career when that wasn't even a pipe dream of people, and they got to see it happen. So they kind of represent a unique generation in the Canadian soccer pyramid, just like players now that are struggling and holding out for the Canadian Premier League will represent a unique generation when they retire 10, 15 years down the line, having bridged that gap and having helped launch those teams. I just think they deserve a lot of credit for coming home and being pioneers in that particular way. For D-Row coming back, for Bernier coming back, I think it's something they deserve a lot of credit for, Kevin.
No, I absolutely agree. And being pioneers, we're talking about Patrice Bernier playing internationally for Canada as well, 53 caps. Patrice Bernier for Montreal, when he came back in 2012 to be part of the first Montreal Impact team in MLS, you could sense there was a lot of questioning. Where was it level B? And Patrice Bernier was not just at the level. He dominated when he plays and still does in the playoffs over the last few years. He has shown, and even the weeks leading up to it. I remember just a few months ago, the weeks coming into the playoffs when Montreal was on a 3-win, 1-loss, 4-game stint. Patrice Bernier's work in the midfield, the passes, the great launching pad that he did for Piatti and Dominic Oduro, especially in the playoffs. Those moments are created by his day-to-day lifestyle, the way he kept his body, his longevity, but the way he kept his nutrition, the way he kept his body, his shape, his condition has always been top-notch. So Patrice Bernier, for many different reasons, is, I want to say, the ideal way you want to be as a soccer player, but has done almost always everything right.
Yeah, and you mentioned the Canada thing, and I did want to get to that. He always took the call, and I still maintain that if he's playing well in the first half of this year, that for a veteran presence, for just even a thank you, that it would be wonderful to have him back on that Gold Cup roster. I don't know whether that's in his plans or not. He's never really indicated that he has retired from international football, so I don't see any issue with that.
But maybe why not, Duane? It is his last season, his last professional contract, like he mentioned on social media today with a great picture. He might be interested. Maybe Canada wants to call him back at least for one of the many different international break this season. Maybe Patrice Bernier wants to. It will be maybe a nice way to wrap it all up.
Yeah, I think it would be a wonderful way to wrap it all up. And I think it would be a wonderful way to extend an olive branch to him to remain part of that program too. Obviously, we understand his literal role will be with the Impact, but there's always room for people like him to contribute in other ways, through scouting, through just promoting the idea of playing for Canada. So I think it would be a wonderful idea, a great idea to have him back at that tournament. And look, I believe, to talk about the Gold Cup in a general term just for a half second, that the Canada should put its strongest lineup, regardless of age, out for this Gold Cup, because bluntly, it's the last thing that Canada is going to play for 2 years. So you might as well go all out in it. And if Patrice Bernier is among the top 24 players or so in Canada at that point, 2024, I forget what the roster size is, then bring him. Bring him, because he will add value to that, and you should be there trying to at least get out of the group this time. So I do hope to maybe see him involved in the Canadian program down the line, and I'd like to see him play one more time. We saw Julian de Guzman have a massive contribution to the team in World Cup qualifying, even when he wasn't really doing the same thing at the club levels anymore, and hopefully Patrice Bernier could do the same thing, Kevin. Just let's end it with this talk about next season, though. What does the signing mean for next season? Is this an indication that the Impact believe that he has a contribution to make to help push them over the top or continue to push them forward toward potential of a title?
Well, we talk a lot about continuity. We talk a lot about stability. Patrice Bernier, literally in his play, he brings a sort of calmness, a sort of relaxed attitude on the pitch when he gets the ball, when he slows things down in a way to more efficiently find that great through ball to Dominic Oduro example, or in that fraction of a moment taking the right decision to move the play, to stop a counterattack, to be at the right place at the right time. Patrice Bernier has made a habit of doing this, especially late in the season and in the playoffs where it counts, Major League Soccer. We've seen it deep around the Montreal Impact just had, and it was talked about today. He wants to go deep. They want to go deep. Montreal Impact has the ambitions of going for the MLS Cup in 2017. So Patrice Bernier's contribution will not only be necessary, it will be obligatory, I believe. It will be almost impossible to do it without him at his highest level. So he will be needed for Montreal to go deep in the playoff with his skill set and his contribution as team captain, with the identity, with the character that Patrice Bernier brings in the locker room. This is needed in 2017.
As a proud Montrealer, I'm sure Patrice Bernier could not allow himself to be a Montreal legend that was eliminated by a Toronto team too. That just, I don't think's ever happened. So that couldn't have happened for sure.
Exactly.
So he'll have to push out. We know the answer to this. He will not get the recognition that he deserves in the American cities because he's a Canadian. He's a French Canadian that has played his entire MLS career in Quebec. We understand that. That doesn't mean that hopefully the league sites, at least hopefully Extra Time Radio or something like that, will make sure that they give him his due, because he does deserve that on some level. We know that he's just not as recognizable for a lot of reasons amongst fans in the United States, but the informed ones, which generally speaking listen to us, because you're listening to a Canadian-based podcast. If you're listening to us, right?
No, exactly. But I do believe, and that is for sure written everywhere, the number 8 will be retired by the Montreal Impact. That is guaranteed, and it has to happen.
And that will be a nice day and a great day for him and all involved when that does happen. All right, Patrice Bernier, from the bottom of my heart, as a Canadian national team fan, I thank you for your contributions. As a Canadian, I thank you for your contributions. And he did it. He's a true gentleman, too. I've had some limited contact with Patrice Bernier over the years. I've interviewed him, I think, on ICF once. He, a couple times in scrums and things like that. Always comes off as a true gentleman. I'm sure you think the same, but I'll let you have the final word before we say goodbye in this segment.
Patrice Bernier, thank you very much. You have more to give. We all know more to achieve on the pitch in 2017. It will be the last picture, the last painting that you will do on that canvas. And for those reasons and many more, always been a gentleman. Patrice Bernier, thank you. We'll take a break and be right back. You're listening to Soccer Today on SPN Radio. You can find the on-demand version of this very show on iTunes, Stitcher, Feedburner, Podbay Player, Podbean, anywhere you get your podcasts under the Sports Podcasting Network feed. Subscribe to our YouTube page to make sure you never miss a live show talking about soccer today, the MLS postgame show, open lines after dark, 5 rings daily during the Olympics. Make sure you subscribe and give us a follow on Twitter at SportsPodNet, and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network.
And welcome back. Kevin, it's a European block we're going to do here. Just real quickly, it's been a really terrible weekend for Juve fans. They also lost last night, so that's not something they're used to.
Exactly. Gonzalo Higuain telling the troops, saying, guys, we're not going to win without effort. We need more effort.
So there you go. We'll get a Serie A guest on here in the days ahead, I think. Just mental note. I'll book and see if Alf's available.
Yeah, Alf. I expect the call soon.
Yes, we'll get that going out there. You wanted to talk about a couple topics off the top, so I'll
Oh
throw to
yeah.
you, and we can go from there.
Well, first of all, the Diego Costa Chelsea thing. He was not available apparently this weekend. He didn't play for Chelsea. It doesn't matter. Chelsea still got the job done. Top of the league as we speak, with a lot of points ahead of a lot of points ahead of City and other teams. But just to finish on Diego Costa. There's not confirmation. Apparently, it's not the China Super League thing that gets him going, that makes him mad that he refused it for now. Chelsea's still saying they're not going to sell him in this window, but he might be a goner in June or the summer window.
Yeah, someone.
I think it's important for Chelsea to have him back for this title run. What he brings and the amount of goals that he brings to the team is incredible this season, and the way he has dialed down his aggressivity. Let's put it this way: he's a little bit more disciplined. At least it's at the right time, and he chooses when he gets suspended. It's against Bournemouth, and he still get the job done by Chelsea. So there's other option, of course, if the dust up, because apparently it could have been a dust up with maybe a training staff or Conte himself. So the Chinese Super League is not that offer, apparently, that the phenomenous offer that Chelsea receive is not necessarily the cause of the pettiness or diva reaction type of Diego Costa. And apparently there's a meeting scheduled or already happened. It's still not sure with him and Antonio Conte.
I could see him going back to Atleti, to be honest. It's the one place that he seemed to be most reined in when he was there. And of course, Simeone, the manager, is one of maybe the only guy in the world that can truly control him. It's like Mancini and Balotelli. Like right there, there's kind of like a symbiotic relationship with those father figure sort of things that happen there, I think. But nonetheless, look, yeah, you need him for the stretch run. You are a lot of points up in terms of Chelsea. I keep calling them you, like you play for them there, Kevin. But Chelsea is a lot of points up.
Yeah, and but there's other options than Diego Costa. You can always have Eden Hazard as a false nine. We've seen this successful. You have Machoui. That might be actually a good option for next year. You know, he's not used a lot this season. Batshuayi, sorry, I don't know why I put an M in there. But you have other options as well. So just Hazard as a false nine, we've seen it being very successful. And the skill set that Hazard brings to the table could be very, very useful at that position. And there's always Pedro that could be at that position. We've seen this being successful too. So there is other option, even though for this stretch. So if the conflict is not resolute, in a stance where, you know what, Conte's like, you know what, I'm going to make an example of you, and bye-bye. And now they can still probably mount a good challenge for the cup, especially for the league, especially with the advance in the table and the amount of points that they've gathered so far.
Yeah, I wouldn't have much doubt that they'll be able to replace his output for 17-18 because they do have that great player, Russian oil money, in their back pocket that they can use to bring someone else in if you follow that. So I don't have any doubt whatever with Chelsea's wealth that they could find and success and, you know, sort of profile that they would find a replacement for him.
And you know what? The move of Nathan Hake being called back from Bournemouth, we didn't talk about this, but they called back from his loan last week after his great goal that he did for Bournemouth a few weeks ago that got Bournemouth a great victory, needed one. And now he's back with Chelsea. He's going to eventually have a role. It's still unclear. But if Costa's by, then you move Pedro up front. It does clear up some space in the midfield that the Ake could maybe be used as a sub or maybe even as a starter if it comes to that.
Yeah. Lots of options and lots of buffer, as we've said. Piet, we wanted to talk about that situation as well. It does appear that West Ham's ordered him back. He's going to train with the under-23s this week, apparently he's been told to. Whether he does or not, we'll see.
So apparently Dimitri Payet wants to go back to France. Apparently his wife has already moved back to France, Duane. Have you seen this? We're not sure. It's all rumors. It's in the gossip in France. He's not happy with West Ham. It's interesting. Dimitri Payet has not been dialed in this season compared to just last year and the other years before. Is there a falling out due to bad performances on the pitch, especially with a position where West Ham need a higher input from him to be competitive, to not be in the relegation zone or close to it like they are at the moment? And for those reasons, is it indicative of maybe you need West Ham to sell him as quick as possible to have that money. So in return, you go get an asset that you need to make sure you don't get relegated in 2017.
Yeah, look, that's a tougher one because he's harder to replace for that club, obviously, and it's a club that has really struggled. Obviously, we talked about earlier this year to find their identity in the new stadium, and with this happening as well, it's not really helping it. Although they had a nice weekend this weekend, a lot of sideways scores on the board, and they were included on that with a 3-0 win over Crystal Palace.
Speaking of the success this weekend, that goal, that Andy Carroll goal, Duane, that great sidekick volley. Bicycle slashed right into the net, the hardest one I've ever seen, and it was hit at a 1.78 meter height, and it was at 100 kilometers an hour, and it was at least like 3 feet under the bar when it came in, so it was very deliberate. I think it's the goal of the season so far. It was one of the best bicycle kick I have ever seen because the contact he got on that ball to get it 100 miles an hour, it's mind-blowing. Sorry, 100 kilometers an hour, it's mind-blowing.
He's an underrated player. I think he gets a bad rep based on his time in Liverpool, which obviously they overspent for him and he didn't live up to it. But certainly, I think that he is an underrated player in a lot of ways and has those kind of goals, those kind of skills in him all the time. So, I mean, I'm putting off talking about Super Sunday a little bit, but I guess we'll have to get there. Look. Soccer is a simple game in many ways. I could break down, and I'm almost sick of talking about City's enigma that is Manchester City this year, because they can look brilliant at times, but they can also look just horrendous at times. 4-0 loss, obviously, to Everton. And the fact that it's Everton, they're losing 4-0 too, you can sort of accept a blowout if it's one of the top teams occasionally. Not
if it's Chelsea or even Leicester, you can always say, the defending champion, even though they're struggling. But no, this time around, it's Everton.
Which is a decent team. I'm not dismissing them, but not a team.
But a 5-6 at best decent team.
Yeah, not a team that a club like Manchester City that has Champions League ambitions, that has certainly title ambitions, should be losing 4-0 to. And especially if you look at it, again, this is where I was going with this simple game thing. And we've said this before. Manchester City struggles in a real basic way. They struggle with teams that put high pressure on them and sit and absorb and defend well and attack on the counter. They do not defend the counter at all. They are terrible at it. They get drawn out of position. Especially if they don't have Fernandinho playing, which he's not available because he's suspended again. They really struggle to slow teams down in that transition on the break, and that just kills them. I mean, we could talk about tactics on some deeper level, but really it comes down to that. They can't defend the counterattack, and that's what this game was. City had 70% possession in it and lost 4-0. That sort of says a couple things. It says possession isn't the be-all, end-all.
And score effect, of course, because when it's 3-0, you don't care if you have the ball or not, so you might be content to just roam around and just make time go by.
Well, yeah, precisely. Precisely. And a lot of people will sort of, look at that as the death of, look at a lot of things that have happened recently and talk about the death of tiki-taka. I don't think tiki-taka is dead, but I do think tiki-taka has to evolve like any tactic that's been out there, because, there's a lot of smart people that figure things out. And, the Leicester's title run last year, which was largely based on the basic tactics I just described, the way Everton played against City and the way that you can sort of knock down teams like this if you can defend them. Now, that said, this also illustrates a couple glaring issues with Manchester City's roster right now. We've talked to death about the keeper. I don't want to bash him anymore. We all know the problems there.
He's not living up to his last name.
Yeah, it was a mistake. They should not have gotten rid of Joe Hart, and I think probably even Pep understands that now. It was a football manager move, and it's a strange one. I don't think the umpire has no clothes, to use that old analogy, but I think that he maybe has less clothes than some people thought. And it was kind of silly to think that just simply changing the manager and basically coming back, what in essence was the same roster, perhaps even a weaker roster, because they got a little younger. They went with a little bit more youth to try and build forward from, to bring in, like the Stones transfer, right? And then Company's been hurt all year, so that's really put even more pressure on them. Not to Vende, it's been kind of a struggle from the start that he came over here. I mean, he does a job, and he's appreciated that way, but he's never lived up to what the transfer in under Pellegrini sort of suggested. Yeah. So it's been a nightmare at the back all season, and confounded by the fact that their fullbacks have gotten old. I mean, they've been playing Pablo Zabaleta, who is a player that is absolutely dear to my heart. That's the one I made one exception with name on my back, and I have a jersey with Zabaleta's name on his back because he's a legend at that club and always will be. But he's also in his 30s now, and he can't play the role that he played on those title teams. So that makes a difference too. They can't use the fullbacks the way that Pep wants to use them. So it's been a bit of a mess. And then you confound that with the fact that really, how many players on City right now would you call world class? And I mean, think about that for a second. I have an answer in mind.
Well, I don't know. I can necessarily, let's name them. So Aguero.
I would call David Silva. Kevin De Bruyne. Yeah, those are the three that I would say were absolutely world class right now. You could look at someone like Raheem Sterling and say that when he's playing well, and I know Raheem Sterling gets a lot of flack.
Raheem Sterling will be world class. Give him another 2 years.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting. I think he's on the way to being that. I think you've got a guy like Iheanacho might get there one day. Who knows?
Maybe 4 years.
He's still a kid. Yeah, he's still a kid. Gabriel Jesus, who's coming in.
Maybe.
We don't know yet what he's going to look like in England.
Maybe he's going to come in.
But yeah, well, who knows what the thing is going on right now.
I just want to touch back to Bravo for a second. I was watching soccer today football today. Sorry, no relations with our show. I was watching on TV on the tele, and they were talking about Bravo and how it's all well and good to be able to pick a pass 20 yards out and be able to relaunch the attack, but when you don't give your team that save, the save that changes the momentum, the save that when you have a one-on-one, Bravo doesn't stop it. And that is maybe part of the problem, or where it deflates the attitude of the team. Like, oh, we kind of needed this, and now we have to even work harder and we have to win. So we have to, and that vicious cycle starts there.
Yeah. Look, Joe Hart, which he will always be compared to, it's impossible not to at this point, right? Joe Hart made some bonehead plays in his time at City. There are absolute howlers that he let in. Obviously, we know his England career has those as well, but he's still loved because he made those saves. He made spectacular, impossible saves in their title runs that people point to and say, had he not done that, they wouldn't have won the title. Like, that was every bit as important as an Aguero goal, as a Yaya pass or whatever was a Joe Hart save through those two title runs. So, when you're not having that, particularly in the more frantic world that is English football, where there is more parity, and I think that's maybe what we're seeing with struggling with Pep. He's never really managed in a league that has a lot of parity before, and he's always managed in those leagues from the top, right? So
not only that, he always was resistant this season so far when he was asked by the journalists, will you change? Will you adapt? Will you try to change what you're doing? Or just trying to adapt what you were doing? And it was always like, we have a process. Well, I'll use a quote that's popular in sports in North America right now. Like, I'm trusting my process. Now is it time for him to maybe change, or at least give the optics, the perception to the journalist or to whomever, the perception that he changes the way he approaches the game.
Yeah, and I think he started to do that a little bit. He's made some noise recently where he's talked about having to understand that there are some unique qualities to the Premier League that he has to get used to and has to manage about. He has been a little more modest at times in some of his answers. I mean, he's still ultimately, all those guys are kind of talk, they drip with condescension when they talk to journalists for the most part. So that's hard to get past, and that's all, not just him. But there has been a little bit more modesty there. He was asked about his legacy and his plans and his stuff in the post-match interview after the Everton game, and he immediately turned it around and said, look, I'm not sad about myself today. I'm sad for my players, because he kind of defended his players a little bit when the understanding and the expectation might have been that he threw them under the bus because they didn't play well, but he didn't do that. He protected them a little bit more, which might indicate that there is some kind of self-evaluation going on there. But this is going to be he's there for 3 years, and probably just 3 years. So you're not going to judge any manager in his first year, really. He shouldn't completely, but he comes in with high expectations. And, I think at this point, he's not going to get fired, but there's going to be a lot of questions about him if he doesn't at least, I think he has to win the FA Cup. I don't think there's any chance that he's winning the other two competitions, especially the league, which is completely off the table now at 10 points down. I would have to say, even if they were perfect, I don't think Chelsea's dropping 10 more points. So it's done.
Chelsea wins the league. I don't think there's maybe if Arsenal gets really hot, but outside of that, I don't see either Manchester club mounting a title challenge in this season. I think Chelsea has done so far what it takes. Outside of a miracle slide by Chelsea and a great rise by another club, I think the title is in the pocket for Chelsea.
Yeah, pretty much the 3-0 win over Leicester City. All right. We are way over on this segment, so we'll probably wrap it now. Real quickly, obviously the Liverpool United game, that late goal, to tie it up. How did that free kick stay out anyway? I still don't quite know the physics of that one. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but alas, that was probably one of those results that neither team is particularly happy with. So, if there's one team happy with it, and they're London. That's exactly. Precisely that. Obviously, Arsenal with the 4-0 win over Swansea, proving it wasn't completely Bob Bradley.
Nope.
That lots of sideways scores on the line.
But
all those sideways scores on the line. You know what game I watched in its completion this weekend, Kevin?
Not Burnley.
Watford, Middlesbrough, 0-0.
Okay.
Watched it all.
Just two things I wanted to say, Duane. Two things for you. Defoe, there's a stat about Defoe and Sunderland this season so far. He has scored 70% of Sunderland's goals.
Yeah, he's a decent player.
Or Sunderland's are really bad, and so they're just Defoe.
Yeah, well, and there's talk about being what there's offers for. West Ham wants.
Well, if you sell him, you don't have anything. You have to replace 70% of your input. How do you want to do that?
Well, that's what people were saying. I was listening to some other UK-based podcasts, and they said that the price to sell him has to be £100 million, which sounds absurd for a 30-whatever-year-old striker of limited, it's probably a guy that's going to be a good player in a mid-table team, but that's what they would have to legitimately sell him for, because that's how much they'd lose if they go down, and if they don't have him, they're going down. So there you go.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And just for you, Joey Barton has scored for Burnley in his return to the Premier League as a sub in the 70th minute. Penalty, Barton finishes it. Penalty. I say penalty. It's a free kick goal. Sorry, he hit a free kick from about 22 yards away. And Joey Barton, as a sub for Burnley, got the 3 points.
Yeah, Joey Barton's a good player. He's just a head case. That's what it comes down to. And he's getting on in years, obviously, but he doesn't. Someone that's that much of a pain in the ass doesn't stick around as long as he does, unless he has some skills. And I think you're going to see him. He seems comfortable in Burnley. It seems like his kind of town, so to speak. So I guess he's always entertaining. So we'll wish him well. All right, Kevin, let's take the break. We'll come back and we'll wrap the show up with some MLS kind of news stuff and some rumors that are out there.
You are listening to SPN Radio, powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
My mama says, hi, Kevin. Let's get back and wrap this baby up.
Your mama says, hi, Kevin? All right. Hi.
Yeah, there you go.
Hi.
I don't know. That was one of my weirder transitions. I'll fully admit. I was sort of reading in the middle and, oh, Christ, I have to come in now. Here we go. I'm going to start quickly with this. This is going to be a bit bits and bytes, a bit Monday roundup, rumor roundup. I think that's what I'm going to call it, the rumor roundup. Anyway, the Chinese Super League announced its foreign quotas over the weekend, and it's something I think came out Saturday that kind of interests me a little bit, Kevin. I didn't put it on the lineup, but this is easy enough to understand.
No, I can understand why, because they reduced the quota, right, of foreign players?
Yeah, you have to have it's 5. You can only have 5 foreigners on the team as a whole. So all we hear about the Chinese Super League is we're focused entirely on the money that they're spending for these foreign players. But the reality is they can only have 5 tier period in the entire roster.
Yeah, but it's still crazy to pay them like $100 million. But
of course it is. Yeah, But it does mean that if only 5 are on the whole roster, that it does require that there be a significant domestic presence on the pitch, which is obviously China's not particularly strong in the game. So it is going to reduce the overall play and probably increase the impact that these foreign players will have, because the level that they're playing against will be weaker than it would be in something like Major League Soccer.
They could literally had a field day. Go there, score 8 goals.
Yeah, the other side of this too, and this is something that there's a lot of quota haters out there, because it's like within the North American sporting mindset, it's not something we're used to. Well, I'm used to it, but it's not something that like a fan of hockey that has discovered MLS would be used to, right? But they're also requiring a minimal sort of basically 8 players on the field at all times be Chinese. I think this is it's the right move for them. It does make it interesting, and probably, from an MLS to bring this back here, it does likely make the competition, as you just said, a little bit less intense for some of these bigger names. That said, the amount of money that they'll spend on them, it seems astronomical at this point. Can
you imagine the amount of goals that Tevez could score? It's going to be quite interesting to watch what happens in the next few weeks. But for MLS, Duane, it's almost a sign of relief. Or sight of relief? That expression. Yeah, that expression, sure. Sign of relief. Because now, with only that 5, they're not going to necessarily go after the same targets or the potential of one. So maybe for MLS, it limits the amount of players or negotiation that will be canceled because of the Super League of China.
Yeah, and I think what you'll see the Chinese Super League do is they'll go after the type of players that MLS did in the beginning of the Beckham role. They will go after the Beckhams of this generation in a bigger way. And that's not necessarily something that most MLS fans are going to be upset about. That if some of those 35-year-olds that are truly at the end choose, like if Steven Gerrard chose to go to China rather than to LA, as one example, I don't think there would have been a lot of Galaxy fans or a lot of MLS fans that would have been all that upset about that, because I think that most fans that are informed right now want the league to start moving away from those type of players and want them, to bring in Laderos and Javenkos, right? Piatis, players that have stuff to bring on a different level that don't quite have the same world format. So you're right. I don't think that the idea that the Chinese Super League is going to be taking players away from MLS, I think speaks to a mindset of what people that think that aren't necessarily either aren't paying attention or have an agenda against MLS. And we all know who we're talking about when we say that. They don't really think it. They're just saying it because they want to knock the league whenever they can. So we'll go there. Kevin, in terms of the rumors this week, and we did, I did mention TFC and their TAM. There has been a suggestion that it's not rocket science to figure this out, but it has been reported in the days after, without specific names, but it has been reported that they are specifically looking for a 10. That makes a lot of sense. And if you think about TFC's roster and you add a truly creative 10 to a lineup that has Javenko and Josie out there.
2 up top, yeah. So you put 2 up top and the number 10 just behind them.
Yeah, and then you have the pro. Yeah, it's a pretty dangerous sounding team if you can find a 10. Now, finding one that can fit in and immediately contribute is easier said than done. But certainly, I think that you will see and Bezvachenko, actually was Manning. Manning said in an interview this week that they do intend to do something in this window. So that would be in the next 4 weeks or so. So there's something to watch out for there. Some exciting times there. In terms of the other Canadian teams, haven't heard a lot. There is obviously Vancouver is really desperate to fix their fullback problem. They adjusted a little bit in the draft, but no specific names coming out there. Any rumblings in Montreal right now?
I'm not hearing anything in particular as we speak, and that's always good signs. Adam Braz mentioned earlier today, Duane, in the press conference announcing Patrice Bernier's resigning. He mentioned how the goal of the Montreal Impact this offseason was more re-signing players and assets that they had last year, and now they're going to find a way. They're in discussion, they said, with Mancosu to make sure that he stays for the entirety of the season. His contract is ending in the end of June. So there's that going on. But outside of that, there's not a lot of details. And their goals in this offseason was to keep the consistency, maybe use the draft, but more key to consistency, re-sign the players they needed to. And if you look at what they've done, that's exactly what they have achieved. Have a very similar team than 2016 going on the pitch in 2017. Only Drogba taken out, but if you add Mancosu in the way that they played in the last run of the team, it bodes well. And maybe their ambition of going after the MLS Cup is serious.
Yeah. Fair enough. Outside of Canada, the biggest Atlanta's in the news again. Apparently, they're linked to a center back by the name of Lorendo Gonzalez Perez. He plays for Tigres. I'm always leery of big center back signings in this league. Certainly, this player fits that sort of heavy Latin approach that they're taking so far, which MLS teams, there's a lot of suggestion that signing Latin players is the way to get value, but I think maybe you have to be careful that they're not all the same. It's not all this. It's not every piece of pie tastes the same, right?
I don't know if it's breaking news. I think it happened an hour ago, Duane. I don't know if you even saw it happen. It's kind of a major MLS news, so sorry to interrupt your thought, but the Red Bulls have traded Dax McCarthy to the Chicago Fire for general allocation money.
That I had not seen. That is significant, absolutely significant. I'm processing that as we speak. First off, poor Dax. Second off,
well, maybe it's a new direction that the Chicago Fire are taking. Dax McCarthy will now be a part of the Chicago Fire, at least for now. Maybe he's bait for another trade. Who knows? But as we speak, he is part of the Chicago Fire, and that's according to 442. So for general allocation money.
Gam, not Tam. Interesting. That's a head scratcher right now off the top of my head. Dax McCarthy was a key component to that very good Red Bulls team. Now they did come up short, obviously, in the playoffs, but I'm not too sure. They have always come up short in the playoffs. I'm not too sure.
Nothing new here.
So they currently, what I'll say, this is very much off the top of my head, and maybe we should look to bring in a Red Bulls interview on this for tomorrow. Off the top of my head, they're weaker right now than they were. So that's good news for Montreal and Toronto, I would say. But obviously, there's another shoe to drop here. They're not just going to move a player for money if they don't have someone that they're anticipating coming in. Now, what I find intriguing is that it's Gam, not Tam, which would suggest that the player that they're thinking of bringing in might be already in the league, so that they're looking to buy a salary down rather than to pay a transfer to bring someone in. So there's some interesting stuff there to process, and maybe we'll reach out and try and get a better idea of what exactly is going down with this for tomorrow.
$400,000 in general allocation money split over the next 2 years in order to bring in the New York Red Bulls captain, according to a league source with knowledge of the deal. The move immediately boosts a Chicago midfield that already added former LA Galaxy midfielder Juninho Villalone this season. So, will be interesting to see. Paul Tenorio on 442 has more details if you are interested.
Yeah, so maybe we'll reach out to Paul tonight. I guess that's where we'll end it right there, Kevin. It's interesting now that we can actually give you that number. That happened completely out of the blue at the draft when they announced the first trade and they said the number, and there was an audible gasp. What are you telling us now? And that was actually probably the most interesting thing to happen in the entire draft day, is that they just suddenly decided to let us know how much allocation was out there.
Go back to the archive of the show where I posted the audio of Don Garber's State of the League address. And he did mention at the end in the Q&A where transparency is something they will strive towards and not run away from it. Not necessarily achieving 100%, and we all are aware of that, but this is a very good start.
Exactly. All right, Kevin, on that note, I am doing another interview in a half hour, so I need to eat something. I am going to say goodbye to the show. As always, though, I will let you have the final word.
And until tomorrow, well, Duane, bon appetit, and everybody, have a great soccer. You were listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us, sportspodcastingnetwork.com.